I was just 5 years old when my father, John, decided to leave home. It was a sunny morning and I was playing in the backyard, surrounded by the flowers that my mother took care of so lovingly. As I lined up my dolls, I heard loud voices coming from inside the house. My parents were arguing again, but this time, the sound seemed more intense, more filled with anger. Curiosity made me abandon my games and move closer to the kitchen window, where I could hear better. Their words blended together in a cacophony of accusations and hurt. "I can't do this anymore, Lisa," my father shouted. "I also have my limits." My mother, her voice breaking, replied, "What about Emma? Are you just going to leave her like that?" The screams became louder and more desperate, each trying to overpower the other's voice. My little heart was beating fast, a mixture of fear and confusion. I couldn't understand what was happening, but I knew something very serious was about to happen. Then, I heard the thunderous sound of something breaking, followed by a terrifying silence. Before I could process the sudden silence, the front door slammed open. My father left hurriedly, with an expression of anger mixed with sadness. He didn't look back, didn't say a word, just walked towards the car. I called out to him, my voice small and shaky, but he didn't respond. He got into the car, started the engine and drove off, leaving a trail of dust on the dirt road. I stood there, with tears streaming down my face. My mother appeared soon after, her eyes red and swollen. She knelt beside me, holding me tightly. "He's gone, darling," she whispered, her voice shaking. I didn't understand the magnitude of what she was saying, but the weight of those words fell on me like a heavy blanket. That was the last time I saw my father. At that moment, I didn't know I would never see him again. The image of him disappearing down the road was burned into my mind, a painful memory that would become a part of me forever. My world, so small and safe until then, collapsed in a matter of minutes. My mother, Lisa, became my safe haven. After my father left, she took on the role of both mother and father with a strength that I would only fully understand years later. She worked tirelessly, picking up extra shifts as a nurse at the local hospital, often returning home exhausted. Still, I always found time and energy to be there for myself. I remember the nights when, even though she was tired, she would sit with me in bed, reading stories until I fell asleep. His words were like a balm for the pain that my father's absence had left. She told stories of heroes and heroines who faced great adversity and emerged victorious. In those stories, I found a reflection of my mother's strength, and that gave me hope. My father's absence was an open wound, a constant pain that manifested itself at unexpected moments. On school performance days or birthdays, I would look at the door, waiting for him to appear, but he never did. In those moments, my mother was always there, with an encouraging smile and a tight hug. She did her best to fill the void, and her constant presence became the anchor that kept me stable. She taught me about love, resilience, and courage through her daily actions. Every day was a lesson in determination and sacrifice. She showed me that true love knows no limits and that resilience is built through struggles and challenges. Even when she was overwhelmed, she never let on the weight she was carrying. When I was sad, especially at times when I missed my father most acutely, my mother always found the right words to comfort me. She would hold my hands and say, "We are strong, Emma. We will get through this together." These words became a mantra, something we repeated to each other in the most difficult moments. Over time, I realized that her strength was not only in her ability to face adversity, but also in her vulnerability. She taught me that being strong doesn't mean not feeling pain, but rather finding the courage to move forward despite it. My mother was a warrior, and through her, I learned to be one too. When I was 12 years old, my mother started to feel sick. At first, they were just small signs. Constant tiredness, a little pain here and there. We thought it was just the result of hard work and daily stress. But over time, the symptoms worsened. She began to lose weight, have unexplained fevers and persistent pain that wouldn't go away. I watched her with growing concern, not knowing what to do to help. My mother, always so strong and determined, tried to hide how much she was suffering. But I saw the changes, the moments when she stopped to catch her breath, the nights when she couldn't sleep due to the pain. Finally, after much insistence, She agreed to go to the doctor. Medical appointments multiplied, each one bringing more uncertainty and concerns. Tests and more tests, and each hospital visit seemed longer than the last. Then came the day that changed our lives forever. We sat in the cold hospital waiting room, the air thick with a sense of anticipation and fear. The doctor entered, with a serious expression that made my heart sink. He asked us to come into his office and sit down. The silence was deafening as he flipped through his test results. The doctor finally spoke, his words clear but filled with crushing weight. "Lisa, you have cancer." The world around me seemed to stop. Everything went into slow motion as I tried to process what those words meant. My mother remained surprisingly calm, her face pale but serene, as I felt a mix of fear, anger, and sadness flood my being. He explained the diagnosis, talking about treatments and prognosis, but I could barely understand what was being said. I looked at my mother, expecting to see fear in her eyes, but all I saw was determination. Even in the face of such devastating news, she maintained her composure, holding my hand firmly. We left the office in silence, walking down the hospital corridor as if we were in a nightmare from which we couldn't wake up. I held my mother's hand, trying to find the right words to say, but everything felt inadequate. Finally, she broke the silence. "Emma, we're going to face this together, just like we always do." His words, although reassuring, failed to dispel the dread that had settled in my heart. In the days that followed, I tried to be strong for my mother, just as she had always been for me. But the reality of the diagnosis hung over us like a dark cloud. From that moment on, our lives changed forever. Each day became a struggle to find hope in the midst of the darkness, to keep faith that, somehow, we would get through this together. My mother faced cancer with the same courage that she faced all of life's challenges. From her first chemotherapy treatment to countless trips to the hospital, she never let fear control her. On days when the side effects were more severe, she still managed to find a reason to smile at me, reminding me that even in the worst situations, there was hope. Between chemotherapy and hospitalizations, our routine changed drastically. The treatment sessions were exhausting, leaving my mother weak and often nauseous. But she never complained, always maintaining a positive attitude. She taught me to be strong, to face challenges with determination, and to never give up. "Emma, we need to be strong no matter what," she said, her voice soft but firm. During this period, I took on new responsibilities. I learned how to administer her medications, take care of her daily needs, and deal with any medical emergencies that arose. Every day was a battle, but I was determined to be there for her, just like she had always been there for me. Every smile she gave me was a reminder that we were in this fight together. The nights were particularly difficult. My mother often couldn't sleep due to the pain, and I would lie awake by her side, holding her hand, offering words of comfort. The house, which was once full of laughter and joy, was now enveloped in a heavy silence, interrupted only by the sounds of medicines and machines that monitored his health. Even on the darkest days, my mother never stopped giving me advice and encouraging me to follow my dreams. "You need to keep studying, Emma. You need to live your life," she insisted, even when she could barely speak. Her strength and resilience were inspiring. She wanted to make sure I continued to grow, that I wasn't defined solely by the illness she faced. The time we spent together during her illness brought us even closer. Each day was a gift, a time to share stories, laughter, and sometimes tears. I learned the true meaning of love and sacrifice through my mother's actions. Her fight against cancer was a testament to her incredible strength of spirit and her ability to love unconditionally. Even in the most difficult circumstances, we were together, facing each challenge side by side. My mother fought bravely for 3 years, but the cancer was relentless. Each day that passed, I saw a little more of his energy drain away, but never his spirit. Over the last few months, she had become increasingly weak, and our conversations were often interrupted by the extreme tiredness that overcame her. However, she never lost hope, always believing that we could have one more day, one more moment together. At 15, I already knew we were coming to an end. On a quiet morning, the sun still rising over the horizon, I stood next to her, holding her hand. The room was silent except for the soft sound of her breathing. I could feel her leaving, and my heart sank with the impending pain of loss. Despite all the mental preparation, nothing really prepares us for losing someone we love so deeply. That morning, she opened her eyes for the last time and looked directly at me. Her expression was serene, free from the pain that had tormented her for so long. In a voice weak but full of love, she said, "Emma, never give up. You are strong and you will find your way." These words, spoken with so much affection and conviction, were engraved in my heart. She was leaving me, but she was also giving me one last gift, the knowledge that I could move on. I held his hand tighter, trying to convey all the love and gratitude I felt. Those words echoed in my mind as she took her last breath. Her body relaxed, and I could feel that she was finally at peace. The weight of reality crashed down on me, and the tears began to flow, but there was a part of me that felt comforted by his last words. After she left, I stood there by her side for a long time, holding her hand and reflecting on our journey together. All the difficulties we faced, all the moments of joy and sadness, all of this was part of a love that now lived inside me. Her absence was crushing, but the memories and lessons she left behind were a beacon that would guide me forward. His final words became my mantra: never give up. Every time I felt lost or overwhelmed, I remembered her gentle voice and unwavering strength. I slowly began to accept that even though she was no longer physically present, her spirit and teachings would continue to guide me. She prepared me to be strong, and now, it was time to honor her memory by living life with the same courage and resilience she taught me. After my mother's death, I went to live with my grandmother, Margaret. Saying goodbye to the house where I grew up was painful. Every corner, every piece of furniture, every photo on the walls carried memories of my mother. Leaving there meant leaving behind an important part of my life, but I knew I needed to move on. My grandmother was there, waiting for me with an open heart and a warm hug. Margaret was a strong and loving woman. Despite her 75 years, she still maintained a vitality that was inspiring. She had been through her own hardships in life, and her wisdom and resilience were evident in every gesture. Moving into her house was difficult, but she did everything she could to make me feel welcome. The first night, as I was unpacking my bags, she came into my room and said, "Emma, this is your home now. Let's take care of each other." Her house became my new home, a place where I could begin to heal my wounds. The atmosphere was different, more peaceful, with a garden full of flowers and an old swing on the porch. Every corner of the house had the mark of my grandmother's affection. The walls were covered in family photos, reminders of times gone by that now seemed so distant to me. Little by little, I began to find comfort in the little things. The smell of freshly baked cookies, the sound of the wind in the trees in the backyard, the constant presence of my grandmother. My grandmother had a routine that quickly included me. Together, we took care of the garden, prepared meals, and talked about everything and nothing. She told me stories from when my mother was young, stories I had never heard before. Through these stories, I felt my mother a little closer, and this helped me deal with the longing. Although she was getting older, Margaret never failed to show her strength. There were days when I found her tired, but she always had a smile for me. I knew she was also suffering from the loss of her daughter, but together we found the strength to move forward. She taught me the importance of leaning on others, of finding comfort in family relationships. Adapting was not easy. There were moments when sadness invaded me, and I felt lost without my mother. But my grandmother was always there, ready to listen and comfort me. Your unconditional love is what sustained me through those first difficult months. Over time, my grandmother's house became a refuge, a place where I could begin to rebuild my life and find a new form of happiness. Each day that passed, I felt like I was healing a little more. The pain of loss never completely went away, but I learned to live with it, to find moments of joy despite it. My grandmother, with her wisdom and love, was fundamental in this process. She not only gave me a home, but she also showed me that it was possible to move on, even after such a devastating loss. My grandmother and I became inseparable. In the beginning, our relationship was built on a mutual need for companionship and comfort, but over time, it grew into something much deeper. Margaret taught me how to cook, and our afternoons in the kitchen became a sacred routine. Together, we made bread, cakes, and traditional family dishes. She said that cooking was a way of bringing family closer, even in spirit. I absorbed each recipe, each technique, as if they were life lessons. In addition to cooking, my grandmother taught me how to sew. We sat together in the living room, the sound of the sewing machine creating a comforting melody. I started with simple projects, mending and tweaking, and was soon making clothes and accessories. The patience and precision that sewing required was a kind of therapy, a way of focusing on something positive. My grandmother said that the ability to create something with your own hands was a valuable gift, something that could be passed down from generation to generation. Despite the pain I carried, my grandmother showed me that life still had beautiful moments to offer. She had a special way of finding joy in little things, the birdsong in the morning, the smell of the flowers in the garden, the taste of a well-cooked meal. She taught me to cherish these moments and find happiness in the simplicities of everyday life. Every day with her was a lesson in gratitude and appreciation. Summer nights on the porch were my favorite times. We sat together, the cool night air bringing relief from the heat of the day. The soft starlight and the sound of crickets created a magical atmosphere. On these nights, my grandmother would share stories of her youth, of my mother, and of other family members I had never met. These stories were like treasures, each revealing a piece of our past, a legacy of strength and resilience. Life with my grandmother also taught me about the importance of community and supporting each other. Margaret was well respected in the small town where we lived, and our neighbors often came to visit her. They brought gifts, helped with heavy tasks, and shared their own stories and experiences. The support network around us was solid, and I felt part of something bigger, a community that looked out for each other. Over time, I realized that my grandmother was preparing me for the future, teaching me skills that would be valuable throughout my life. More than that, she was showing me how to find strength in times of adversity and how to cultivate joy even in the most difficult circumstances. Our life together, marked by simplicity and love, has become a pillar of stability and a beacon of hope for me. As the years went by, I noticed that my grandmother was starting to forget things. At first, it was just small memory lapses that I thought were normal for someone her age. She would forget where she left her keys or not remember the name of an acquaintance. These incidents were sporadic and didn't worry me much. But over time, these lapses began to occur more frequently and affect important aspects of our lives. I remember one afternoon when we were cooking together. As usual, she stopped suddenly, looking at the recipe with an expression of confusion. "Emma, what's the next step?" he asked, something she had never had to do before. It was a recipe she knew by heart. This seemingly small moment was the first time I realized something was seriously wrong. Episodes of forgetfulness became more frequent and severe. She started getting lost in our own house, forgetting the way to her own room. There were days when she didn't remember to eat or take her medicine. I tried to hide my concern, but my heart sank more and more with each new sign of the disease. We talked about what was happening, and she herself expressed frustration and fear about what was happening in her mind. Finally, I decided it was time to seek medical help. I took my grandmother to the doctor, and after a series of tests, we received the diagnosis: Alzheimer's. The doctor explained that the disease would progressively affect her memory and other cognitive functions. I felt devastated, as if the ground had been ripped out from under me. Seeing the woman who had always been my rock face something so cruel and unforgiving was unbearable. But I knew I needed to be strong, just like my mother had been. I remembered my mother's words, "We are strong, Emma. We will get through this together." I decided that I would do everything I could to take care of my grandmother and make her life as comfortable as possible. I started studying the disease, looking for ways to help and better understand what she was facing. I didn't want her to feel alone in this process. The routine at home has completely changed. I adapted the house to make it safer and easier for her to navigate. I placed reminders and labels on objects and doors to help her find her way around. I created a daily routine that could bring some stability and predictability to our lives. It was hard and emotionally draining work, but I was determined to do my best for her. Despite the devastating diagnosis, my grandmother and I continued to find moments of joy and connection. The illness was relentless, but our bond remained strong. Each day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to express love and gratitude. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to face it, one day at a time, alongside my beloved grandmother. Taking care of my grandmother was an immense challenge. The disease progressed, and I watched helplessly as his mind slowly faded. Each day brought new challenges, and the person I knew seemed to disappear a little more. However, I refused to give up on her. The woman who had been my strength and my comfort deserved all my effort and dedication. I knew her dignity was in my hands, and I did everything I could to maintain it. The care routine became intense. I became responsible for every aspect of her life, from food to personal hygiene. Tasks that were once simple, such as bathing or dressing, now required patience and care. She was often frustrated and confused, and it was my role to calm her and make sure she felt safe. I learned to read her moods and respond to her needs, even when she couldn't express them clearly. Every day was a struggle to maintain her dignity and comfort. I made adjustments to the house to make it safer and more welcoming. I put non-slip mats, labels on objects, and nightlights to help her find her way around. I changed our schedules to accommodate his new needs and to ensure he had a predictable, calming routine. I learned to be flexible, adapting to the constant and unexpected changes that the disease brought. I learned patience, something I never knew I had in such abundance. There were days when frustration and tiredness overwhelmed me, but I always remembered how much my grandmother meant to me. In moments of despair, I drew strength from the memories of the times she cared for me. Your stories, your laugh, and the love we shared were my source of motivation. Even in the most difficult situations, there was a deep feeling of connection and love. Valuing every moment we still had together became essential. Despite her illness, there were moments of clarity when my grandmother returned to who she was. On those occasions, she would smile at me, and I would see the gleam of recognition in her eyes. We took advantage of these moments to talk, remember stories, and simply be there for each other. These brief flashes of lucidity were precious, memories I held on to with all my might. The disease continued to progress, and moments of lucidity became increasingly rare. Yet every smile, every kind word I managed to get out of her was a victory. I learned that care was not just about meeting physical needs, but also about nurturing the spirit. Even when words failed, the transcendent love we shared spoke for itself. Taking care of my grandmother was an immense challenge, but also an act of deep and unconditional love. The last few years have been the most difficult. As Alzheimer's progressed, my grandmother became increasingly dependent. Simple activities such as eating and dressing became impossible for her without assistance. I took on the role of full-time caregiver, dedicating myself completely to his well-being. Each day, my love for her pushed me to do my best, even when exhaustion and sadness threatened to overwhelm me. The daily routine was exhausting. I woke up early to prepare her breakfast, helping her to eat and then get dressed. Bathing, which used to be a quick task, now took a considerable amount of time, requiring patience and delicacy. The nights were even more challenging, as insomnia and agitation often kept her awake. I took turns caring for her and trying to rest, but sleep was rare and superficial. I did everything I could to keep her comfortable. I rearranged the house to make it more accessible, installed grab bars, and removed obstacles to prevent falls. I hired a nurse to help me a few hours a week, which gave me brief relief. However, seeing the woman I loved so much disappear before my eyes was painful beyond words. Each new memory loss, each new disability, was a deep blow to my heart. The changes in her personality were the hardest to bear. The caring, strong woman I knew often turned into someone confused and scared. There were days when she didn't recognize me, and those were the most painful. I held her and whispered words of comfort, hoping that somehow she would know she was safe and loved. My constant presence was my way of making sure she never felt alone, even when her mind betrayed her. Seeing my grandmother's gradual degradation was a constant reminder of the cruelty of the disease. The pain of losing parts of her little by little was immeasurable. There were moments of despair, when I felt helpless and overwhelmed. At these times, I sought strength in the memories of the happy moments we shared. I remembered your laughs, your stories, and the unconditional love you always offered me. These memories gave me the strength I needed to continue. Yet even in the midst of the pain, there were moments of tenderness and connection. Small gestures, a smile, a handshake, a look of recognition have become precious. I learned to value these moments, knowing that they were rare and fleeting. Taking care of her, despite all the difficulties, was a privilege. I was somehow repaying all the love and care she gave me over the years. And despite the suffering, there was a deep beauty in our shared journey. My grandmother passed away at 81 years old. It was a quiet spring night when the stars twinkled softly in the dark sky. We were in his room, lit only by the soft light of the lamp. I was next to her, holding her fragile hand, feeling the light pressure of her fingers on mine. His breathing was calm, and there was an unexpected peace on his face. Even with my heart heavy, I knew that his suffering was coming to an end. The hours passed slowly, and I remained by his side, whispering words of love and gratitude. I told him stories of our life together, recalled happy moments, and promised that I would always carry his lessons with me. Even though she couldn't respond, I felt like, somehow, she heard me. The sound of your breathing was the only thing that broke the silence of the night. She passed peacefully into the night. I felt the change in her breathing, a final sigh that seemed to release her from the burden of illness. A sense of tranquility filled the room, and I knew she had found peace. Tears streamed down my face, but there was also a quiet relief in knowing that she was no longer suffering. I squeezed his hand one last time, feeling a mix of sadness and gratitude. His death was a heavy blow. The woman who had been my safe haven, my guide and my confidant, was now physically absent. The house, which had once been filled with his vibrant presence, felt strangely empty. Every corner brought memories of her, and the pain of loss was almost unbearable. But in the midst of the sadness, I remembered my mother's words, "You are strong and you will find your way." These words echoed in my mind, offering unexpected comfort. In the days that followed, I found comfort in the memories and lessons she left me. I relived each special moment, each teaching, and realized how much my grandmother had shaped who I am. Her strength and resilience were now part of me. In the midst of my grief, I began to see the beauty in the legacy she left behind. His life, marked by love and courage, would continue to guide me. Organizing the funeral was a painful task, but also a celebration of her life. Friends and family gathered to honor the incredible woman she was. We shared stories, laughs, and tears, remembering her with affection and respect. As I said goodbye to my grandmother, I promised myself that I would honor her memory by living a life full of love, strength, and gratitude, just as she taught me. Now, at 25, I'm alone again, but I carry with me the strength of the women who raised me. The journey so far has been arduous and full of challenges, but it has also been a journey of growth and self-discovery. Every lesson my mother and grandmother taught me, every moment of love and courage we shared, shaped the person I am today. The pain of loss is immense, an emptiness that can never be completely filled, but there is also a feeling of deep pride. I survived so much adversity and I'm still standing. My father's departure, my mother's battle with cancer, and the difficult years caring for my grandmother with Alzheimer's. All of these experiences taught me to be strong and resilient. I look back and see not only the pain, but also the incredible ability to overcome. Every tear, every moment of despair, strengthened my determination to continue. Every day is a new opportunity to honor their memories and build my own life. I remember the words of my mother and grandmother, their voices soft but full of conviction, encouraging me to move forward. I enrolled in college, pursuing a dream that my mother always encouraged. I study nursing, inspired by the dedication and care that I have learned to value so deeply. Every step I take in my career is a tribute to their love and sacrifice. The house I now live alone is full of memories, but it is also a space for new beginnings. I hung photos of them on the walls, not as a constant reminder of the loss, but as a celebration of their lives and the lasting impact they had on me. I invite friends over, create new memories, and transform sadness into something beautiful and meaningful. With each visit, I share the stories of my mother and grandmother, keeping their memories alive through my words. Full of hope and resilience, I continue building my path. I found a supportive community, people who understand and share my journey. I learned to ask for help when I needed it, something my grandmother always insisted was essential. Life is a constant flow of ups and downs, and knowing that I'm not alone, even in the loneliest moments, gives me renewed strength. The future is uncertain, but I face each challenge with the certainty that I can overcome it. The courage I inherited, the love I received, and the lessons I learned are the foundations upon which I build my life. Every day is a tribute to the women who raised me, an opportunity to live fully and meaningfully. I know I will find my way because they taught me to never give up, to always believe in myself, and to seek beauty and strength in all things.